lounging, son.
Back to the Comic Lounge. My name's Ryan, and back with me again is one of my favorite cartoonists. Katie Skelly is with me, and we are going to talk what she's been up to since we last talked and what she's got in the works. So I'm happy to have you back.
Thank you so much. There's a helicopter that just flew over in honor of this interview, so it's great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I mean, so I think since we last talked, I think Maids wasn't even out yet, if I remember correctly. And you moved also, so you made a move across the country. So before we get into your projects, like how have you been? What have you been up to lately?
I'm doing pretty well, thank you. LA has been really great. I moved here in April of this year, and I really love it. It's been a really good, welcome change. I feel a lot better. I feel way more creative now that I'm here too, which is nice. I have a little bit more space and a little bit more time to myself. So I've been working a lot and still doing my job and still doing comics, and so far so good.
So a couple things, obviously we talked to Maze last time. I really enjoyed the book. I loved it. I was really glad to finally have it in my hands. You have done a couple other projects, started a podcast, The Flying Spot with Sally Madden. What kind of prompted you to start a podcast talking comics?
We talk to each other about comics all the time, and one time we just had this conversation, and we were talking about Peter Bag's Hate comic, the Hate series, and she made this really good point that a lot of women relate to Enid from Ghost World when really they should be relating to Lisa from Hate, because Lisa is this psychotic mess who lives in a wall, and she wears a burlap sack. And I don't know, I find more that I have more in common with her than I do with Enid. And once she brought that up, I was like, oh my God, that's such a good insight. And we just talk about comics so much all the time anyway, that I was like, I think that we should put something together and put a show out, just because I love talking to her so much. And I think we play really well off of each other. So yeah, and we just wanted to do something that was a little bit more lo-fi. We didn't want to have to get bogged down by a ton of editing or, really trying to be a definitive source on anything. It's actually probably the most fun project that we have between the two of us, where all we have to do is just read a book and then show up and talk about it. So it's a very nice way to still participate in comics, even when we're not necessarily working on comics directly at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, well, it's not why I started this site, but why I started the podcast too with my buddy Dylan. We just like talking comics. So really it's just a way to hang out and talk, and then you press the record button, What has the response been from fans and stuff that have listened to it? How do you decide what books you're going to read? I mean, obviously you talked about Hate, but you've gone through quite a few other stuff. The Max is one of my favorite books, and I thought that was really cool that you guys did that. How do you guys plan stuff out, or do you just kind of wing it?
We usually just kind of wing it. We've been taking turns, 1 week I'll pick a book, the next week she'll pick a book. But for the most part, it's really just been, finding books that we are either very curious about but have never taken the time to actually read, or talking up books that we know so well, like the back of our own hand, and seeing what the other person who's maybe reading it for the first time brings to that conversation. So, Sally knows a ton about Edward Gorey, who we're going to cover in our next episode. And sadly, that's a total blind spot for me. So we're just going to try to, combine our knowledge and our opinions about this book and put out a good conversation. So yeah, for the most part, it's just been pretty open-ended, and lo-fi is the vibe we're going for.
Nice. And does going back, revisiting stuff or discovering new stuff, does that ever spark a new kind of creativity in a way that maybe you didn't experience before, just going through something by yourself?
I definitely have a new appreciation for everything that I read, because one of the books that we went over is by Nina Bonjevic. It's called Bezamina, It came out in 2019. It's a Fantagraphics book. It's a really beautiful book. And at first glance, it seems so simple. But the more time that you spend with it, the more you come to realize that it's working with so many different narratives going on at once. And there's so much symbolism in the imagery, and you can go back and read it again and again and find more and more there. And the subject matter is very difficult, and it's a difficult topic that it's broaching, but it does it in a way that is beyond, memoir or essay. It's really kind of taking all of these elements and presenting them in an allegory that only one person could have come up with, but the entire world can enjoy. So now when I go to comics and I read a new comic, I'm actually using like the Bezamina framework to try to find more than what might necessarily just be at the surface level. So I definitely have a new appreciation as a reader for that reason, but it has also made me so much more critical as a reader as well, because to see a work that is able to achieve so much, you can't help but bring that lens to other comics that you look at and see where things fall short, So it also has put a lot of pressure on me as a comics artist and as a writer to try to amplify the things that I'm doing to a greater degree, which is both very encouraging to see, like, oh, there's still so much more you can do in comics, like we're not tethered to any one particular thing. You can still find new ways of expressing yourself in comics. Oh shit, now I have to do it. Like, so it's a mixed bag, but yeah, I definitely have a newfound appreciation for so much more in comics, and we're just kind of putting a history of like our understanding of the way that the medium works together in like podcast format. So yeah.
That's what I love about, like you and Cartoonist Kayfabe, like watching Cartoonists go through books. You guys analyze stuff in a way that I can't, like I don't look at stuff the same way, like as an artist. Like even my wife will point stuff out to me because she likes to paint, and I just don't see things in that same light. So like hearing you guys explain stuff in a certain way, it makes me look at the work differently too. So it's also additive to us as fans, which is what I really appreciate. And Bezamina was a very heavy book, for sure.
I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. I'm glad that you enjoy the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's awesome. Have you thought of going through Monsters by Barry Windsor Smith? Has that crossed your guys' mind about going through or no?
I think so. I'm pretty sure it's on our list because we do have a running list of titles that people have suggested to us in addition to things that we really want to do. So yeah, it's probably on there. At this point, I think we have like a Google sheet. It's like 300 cells long at this point. We have to start going through it. But it's very encouraging that people are like, oh, I really enjoyed this book. I'm curious to know what your take on it will be. That's a very like generous offer, because there are so many books and films and things that like I treasure that I'm just like, I know how I feel about it. I'm not looking for a second opinion, but that people want, to hear different perspectives on work that they love, I think is so wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, not only do I like hearing the opinions on stuff I love, but sometimes things I don't necessarily like. I'm like, maybe I need to hear a different perspective on it. And I've actually changed my mind on things before because, like, I read it at, first glance. Maybe I wasn't paying attention fully. Maybe I was tired. But then I hear somebody else talk about a book, and then I go back and I'm like, okay, now I can appreciate. Now I understand. I needed to hear a different perspective. And I think that that's what you give and, other channels give. And that's something I really enjoy.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what else you guys have in the works for sure.
Thank you.
And then you did the Queen of the Ring with Jaime Hernandez, another one of my favorites. But you edited this book of wrestling, female wrestlers, and you interspersed within it, you interviewed him, and you have snippets of that throughout. Can you talk a little bit about how that project came about and kind of how you're tapping into a different creative aspect of your mind when you're not necessarily creating a comic book, but you're helping put together this book and curating it?
I I studied art history at the undergraduate and the graduate level. I didn't finish my master's because I wanted to go draw comic books, which turned out to be the right choice. But I still have a little bit of those muscles left in terms of, being able to present work in context and make it, historically, socially, aesthetically relevant and interesting. And so I was with Jaime in his studio one day, and we were just kind of looking at pieces that he had, and he showed me some of these wrestling drawings. And he was like, no one has ever really seen these before. There's maybe, a handful of people in the world that have seen them. And I'm looking through them, and they're just very deceptively simple works on just regular computer paper, just 8.5 by 11. Some of them are still sketches that aren't finished. Some of them are fully inked. Some of them are colored in colored pencil, which you never see with Jaime. And he's like, when I'm done with these, I usually just throw them away. And I was like, okay. So let me see, the rest and what you have. And he showed me there's this pretty sizable archive of these works, the ones that he hasn't thrown away. And so I asked him, would you ever want to put these out in any sort of collection? My first instinct, because I studied art history and that's my background, I was like, oh, these would be amazing as a gallery show. And Jaime is generally a little bit hesitant about gallery and museum work, and I understand that. And so I was like, well, if you think about it, this would really make a great book because the formats are also similar. It's easy to scan. It's easy to present this in a way that's compelling because the drawings are so good, and the story behind them, as to why they've been hidden away for so long is also so compelling. And so I brought this up to him, and I have to be honest, I think Jaime really talked himself into it. I think he liked the idea, and then as time went on, he became more receptive to actually doing it. And so it was really just a matter of sorting through that archive, getting high quality scans of everything, which Fantagraphics put together. They did a really great job. And for my part, it was figuring out the best way to present the work that had me removed from that equation. So I wanted it to kind of read like this oral history of Jaime's work. So I interviewed him. I took all of my questions out. So it just reads as this kind of memoir almost of how much he enjoyed wrestling growing up, what it meant to him, why it was important for him to see women that had like secret lives and had, other worlds that they had access to. So it fits well into like the history of Love and Rockets, but it's also something that is so unto itself that I think the book makes a lot of sense in terms of, the best way to collect that information. Because it should still be in this, it would be great as a gallery show, but you would really limit access for people. And the price point is fairly low. So if you are someone who wanted to get the art of Jaime Hernandez, the huge art book, that's a beautiful book, but it could be a little cost prohibitive. So this is a great way to take a look at Jaime's originals and the way that he works, that everybody could have access to. So I'm very proud of it for that reason. So I think it preserves a lot of history and also makes it accessible for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I have the studio edition of Jaime's as well, but this one was definitely really cool, and getting to see his work in color, which, like you said, is very rare that you see his work in color. I thought that was really cool. Did you come up with the complete book design too, or did you just edit like the interior? Like, did you completely put the entire package together?
No, that was Jacob Covey
Okay.
Jacob
Yeah.
Covey at Fantagraphics, who's a wonderful designer. He's very talented. He also did the design for Mates. So I've worked with him before, and I conceptualized, I wanted it to look like, not just, I didn't want it to look like an art book. I didn't want it to be a big, stuffy, pretentious coffee table book. The funny thing about it is the way that we both came at it, Jacob and I, it sort of ended up as almost this like yearbook or like a textbook format. It has this sort of scholastic feel to it. I don't know, I'm very happy with that. But to me, the most important thing in terms of the design was that I really wanted all of the line work to show, all of the pencil work, and all of the brush work, or the Sharpie marker work, I guess I should say, because the cover where you see all that gradated black, that was all done by Jaime using Sharpie. So I really just wanted to make sure the work was as close to it would be in real life in the presentation in the book. But Jacob came up with the entire design. I was very happy with this idea that he had, which was to take all of the text from Jaime and make it look like it had been cut out of like a newspaper or a magazine and paste it into the book. I thought that that was brilliant because it really lends to the dreamy quality of the book. It feels like it's an artifact from a place or a time that doesn't necessarily exist, which is great because Jaime is working in this realm of reality and fiction with all of the women, because they're sort of based on women that were actual wrestlers. They're sort of not. They have their own histories and their own stories. So it really is this little meta universe, and the book design reflects that so well. So I'm so pleased with that.
Have you thought of doing other projects like this? Like, do you want to do more things like this? And is there other sketches that you saw that you're like, don't throw those away? Because that's kind of alarming to hear that he's like throwing away these pieces of art. That's great.
I know. But when you work as much and you're as prolific and you're also as gifted to be able to just create, have like a direct one-to-one translation from what's in your mind to what's on the page. I think he can afford to throw things away, as crazy as that sounds. That's his logic and not mine necessarily. I want to keep everything that he does. But the story for this is like the background for this is so wild that these were works that nobody had seen, that I'm a little gun shy about what I want to do next. I do, to answer your question, yes, I would love to do more work like this, but it's so hard when you come out swinging so hard with like, here's, hundreds of drawings by Jaime that no one's seen before. It's my very first time editing anything. How do you, follow that up? Or do you follow that up? Do you just say, once and done? So there are a lot of things that I really want to put together, but it's just going to be a matter of time and being able to make the connections that I need to make in order to do it. I've been thinking a lot about, I'd really love to edit an anthology of horror comics. That's something I've been thinking about a lot, just because, I see so many great comics by young women, particularly on Instagram. There's just this thing I've noticed of like young women that do horror comics on Instagram. And I'm like, there's so much good work here. And I would love to put something together. I would love to work on a compilation of Jukika comics. Those are Hungarian strips that were in a Hungarian newspaper. Do you know Jukika?
No, I've never heard of that.
Oh my gosh, they are so wild. And it's just, they follow this girl around who has this cute little bob haircut. She kind of looks like the Utz Chips girl. And she just runs around and she's just an innovator, and she's innovating all day. She's always figuring out ways to like get on the bus for free or like steal someone's suitcase. She's so funny. I just love Jukika. So it's been very difficult to get a hold of anyone who will talk to me about Jukika because the creator, Paul, oh gosh, I can't say his last name. His first name is Pal, but it's been very hard to get in touch with anyone who has the scans of the comic. So yeah, but I would love to do that. There's a lot of things I would really like to do. It's just going to be a matter of like making the connections to people that I need and making the time for it, because I still have to do my own stuff too,
Yeah, I mean, I like hearing the anthology. I feel like there's not enough anthologies like on the stands in the shops, that I see. And I mean, definitely a lot of like indie people. I'm seeing a lot of. I think it's Rust Belt Review. That's I think I discovered through MS Harkness. I think she sent me a copy of it. That was pretty cool. But anthologies are awesome because that's how like I discover and other people discover different creators, because you may come
Mm-hmm.
for one cartoonist, but then you're discovering like maybe five, six, seven others inside the book. So I definitely think you should do that horror
Yeah.
anthology for sure. And I like Instagram is awesome in that sense that I fall down rabbit holes where like I'll click on one profile, and then before I know it, I've been on there for like an hour and I'm just following all these different cartoonists. And yeah, I think Instagram has definitely been an amazing resource in discovering new people, and I think
Yeah.
it's been pretty cool. I hope you bring some of those talented female cartoonists into this horror anthology book.
Yeah, thank you. I just have to get it together and do it. It would be great to have something for like next Halloween, you know?
Yeah, I mean, is it something that you would just edit, or would you do a story in it as well?
I think I might just edit it because I'm always I'm always skeptical of anthologies that include work by the editor. I have to say, unless it's an essay or something, I'm kind of like, well, you could have just put your thing out, you know?
Yeah, yeah, I guess. Well, let's talk about your new book, Heaven, which I absolutely loved.
Thank
Can
you
you
very
talk
much.
a little bit about the project, how it came about? I mean, this is your follow-up to Maids, and are you doing something similar also in terms of releasing single issues and then collecting it?
Let's see. Well, Maids, I was so happy with Maids, and it came out October of last year. But it was just this really weird void where it came out, but I was like, now what? Because I couldn't go on tour or do in-store signings or really do anything. So it felt like this book that just fell into a void. But I was like, regardless of how that went or how that felt, I'm like, I have to do it again. You know, you always like, you have to get back up and do it all over again. So I had this idea knocking around in the back of my head for a while about a haunted strip club. And I don't know where it came from or what it means, but I was like, I need to start writing about this. Like now just feels like the time I have the headspace to do it. So I put the first issue out in September of this year, and I'm working on the second one now. Hopefully that'll be out. Oh, it'd be so great to have that out by the time you put this up. I'm going to work on it. But I am intending to put it out in issues and then collect it again, but I'm not 100% sure how I want to collect it. I have been thinking about crowdfunding it actually, because even though the distribution would be a pain in the ass, I would kind of like to make a little money. So we'll see
Hmm.
what happens. And I've had such great luck every time I've done a Kickstarter that I'm like, oh, maybe I should just go for it this time. But I also love working with Fantagraphics and I love working with Jacob. So, and Keely McCarthy over there, she's another really talented designer. So I'm not 100% sure yet, but yes, it's going well. And I'm very superstitious, so I can't say too much about it, but I'm very happy with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome. I mean, all your books they have like a similar vibe, but they're different from one another. Like I didn't know what to expect from Heaven, but it was awesome. I mean, a haunted strip club is definitely not something that I would think about. And then you have the click, the high school clicks and stuff like that, and your coloring and your line work just continues to get better with each project. Not to say that they're not good on each project, but I mean, I like each one better than last. It's usually like how I feel when somebody asks me about it's the same response I give with like an Ed Brubaker project. When someone's like, "What's your favorite?" I'm like, "It's usually whatever I read last," and that's
Right.
what I feel about with your stuff. Um, what? Why do you like to do when so many people will do straight to graphic novels, right? What's the decision behind wanting to do release them in single issues before collecting them when you don't necessarily have to?
I think they look great. And it's the one time that I get to do everything myself, and I love doing that. So I'll always do it. You know, the only thing I rely on is the vendor, the printer. Everything else I get to do myself. So I love that. It's also a good way to make a little money, you know, before the graphic novel comes out. And it can be difficult and it can be discouraging to just sit and work on something very long form, at least for me, without getting any sort of feedback on it or building any kind of press around it. So I found it to be very helpful for getting readers familiar with it, like getting, you know, your sort of fan base on board, and then you take that and you go and present it to the rest of the world when it's finished and you have a book. So very that's been very useful for me. So I don't want to do it any other way, really. And plus, in the time it would take me to finish a like full graphic novel, it would be like, well, you wouldn't see me for 2 years, you know. And I just always want to be out there. So I'll keep doing it this way. And I just come from, you know, indie comics and zines, and it was all about just how you always have something new at your table. That model has worked for me. So far so good.
Yeah, I mean, how many issues are you planning before an eventual collection?
Probably 5 or 6.
Okay.
It'll depend. There's a lot that I have to get to in this story. There's just so much. And I also keep going back and forth about, like, should I just keep it going forever? Like, do I have another idea after this? We'll see what happens. But I think it'll probably be 5 or 6 to answer your question.
All right, cool. I kind of want to ask before I forget too. You're like, do I have something past this? Do I have any idea? Like, do you try, like when you're working on projects, are there ideas that kind of like are germinating that you want to think about getting to, or do you just you're 100% all into whatever you're working on and you're not even thinking about anything that's past this?
I will get like little I don't know how else to describe it, but it's almost like a little notification in my head that is, you know, an idea will come up and it'll come up again and it'll come up again as I'm working or as I'm doing any other number of things. And I found out that the way that ABBA used to write their songs was that they would have a whole day where they would just like improvise and make things up. They wouldn't record any of it or write any of it down. And then the next day, they would come back to the studio and see what they remembered, because what they remembered would end up being a hit. It needs to be something that's catchy, you know. So I'll get a lot of ideas for a lot of different things. But and I don't take notes on them, like the first few times I'm getting those ideas, I won't write them down or do anything. But if they keep coming back to me, I'm like, well, if it's sticking in my head, it's probably a good sign that it'll stick in someone else's head too. So that tends to be the way that I at least start forming a story.
Back to like, you're doing single issues. You said 5 or 6. What's the time frame that you're giving yourself? I mean, I know you said by the time I post this, you're hoping to have second issue going, but like, what is your ultimate goal in terms of timing that you want to do this?
I would love to have something out every 2 years, if possible, to have a graphic novel out every 2 years. For the most part, I've been fairly consistent with that. Sometimes it'll be 3 years, but then I'll have a collection of something older that I can put out in between, so that kind of balances it out. But if I can do something every 2 years, then I'm happy, because I think 2 years is about as long as it takes to like really germinate an idea and evolve an aesthetic, get it out of your system, and then get a new one in the works. So that's been the best pattern for me. I do think a lot about, if I were to not have a job or not have any responsibilities, would I want to do something every year, every 6 months? How often? You know? But I think that this is the best way for me to do it, because I think I would go insane if I had that much time to actually work on it. I need like restraints in my life. I need like walls and like limitations, because that's when I actually get things done. That's just how I work. But in terms of issues, I'm always like, oh, it's that 2 number again. I'm like, if I could do it every 2 months, that would be really great. Is there anyone like keeping score? Am I gonna like lose points if it's 3 months? No, but it's just one of those things that you have to keep up, or else, the demons come out or whatever. I don't know. It's
And then distribution. Like this is not in the diamond. I mean, distribution's all over the fucking place in comic books right now. I mean, there's new ones popping up left and right. People are leaving this distributor to go to this one. You distribute this on your site. You can get it directly from me, which is how I got it. I did notice I saw it on Strangers, the Strangers fanzine. They're distributing Heaven as well. How else are you planning to get this into people's hands? Are you doing cons? Is that coming back into play? Because I mean, obviously there was no conventions for quite a while because of the pandemic, but they are coming back. Are you planning on doing them?
I'm doing my first zine show, my first one since 2019 in December. That'll be December 5th. It's called Permanent Damage, Permanent Record. I'll make a note of it. So we'll figure it out. But it's in LA. And it's a smaller zine show, and I'm so excited to be doing it. So I'm gonna go and obviously be as cautious as possible. But I'm ready. I'm ready to get back into it. And I'm hoping in 2022 I can do a lot more shows and travel a lot more. So I'm down. I'm ready. I'm ready to get back into it. I especially just miss like the smaller shows, zine shows. It's just this feeling of like camaraderie that's there is very nice. So I'm looking forward to that very much. Strangers is distributing it, and I have a couple other shops that are carrying it now as well. I am not proactive about going after shops, but if they want to order wholesale from me, I 99% of the time am happy to do that. I'm more proactive about other projects I have and getting those into retailers because they tend to have the profit margins are a little bit better. So I sell a tarot deck and an oracle deck, and when I sell those, I make a nice amount of money. But with comics, it's always a little bit less. So I'm not really proactive about it for that reason. But I am very pleased that they're in shops now, and I think I will become more proactive because when I think about it, when I was going to stores when I was, a teenager, like finding anything that was a little bit off the beaten path just meant so much to me, whether I liked it or not. I was just like, wow, this is still showing so much potential of this medium and blah. And that's one of the reasons I loved the Max so much, because it was just so out there. I'd never seen anything like it, and I loved it so much for that reason. So I'm going to work harder on getting things into stores for sure, and doing shows and doing whatever else really. I haven't made the move into like the digital space so much for my comics yet, like selling PDFs, just because I am a little bit worried about piracy and something just getting, people being able to trade it around for free. Obviously, I don't mind that so much, but I don't want to make it easier for people, and I would like to get a little bit of money for what I'm doing. So I'm a little hesitant about that.
I prefer stuff in print too. So I mean, like and definitely PDF. I mean, there's websites that just have scans of comic books, and it's like it's disheartening too, especially when it's like an indie creator like yourself that doesn't have like this big like conglomerate corporation that's just making money off of it. So
Right.
but yeah, I definitely want to see your stuff in stores more. And then in terms of your stuff that's not in print, the stuff that is fucking impossible to track down sometimes. I mean, I did it. It was hard, but I had to go through three different channels to try to get like the agency and Operation Margin and stuff like that. Have you thought about reprinting any of that?
Well, the agency is coming back. I spoke to Eric Reynolds about that because I get a lot of requests for it, which is so fantastic. And I'm happy to have that back out, and I'm actually going to do a new story for it. So that will be, I don't think they've announced it yet. So don't tell anyone out there, okay? This is between us. But that should be winter of next year, 2022. So I'm very excited about that. And I mean, it would be great if that was timed around like a Heaven collection too. So that would be really good. But Nurse and Operation Margarine, those are from 2012, 2014, respectively. I do sell those as PDFs. I do that through Gumroad. But yeah, for the most part, I'm sad that things are hard to find. I only have one copy of Operation Margarine myself, so I understand. And now Ad House, which was a great publisher, is no longer publishing. So yeah, that if you can find it, pick it up.
Yeah, I mean, and they're going expensive too. So if you can find them
I
for a good
know,
deal,
and
like
all I want to know is where's my cut? Like I'm here. When it came out, I made $8 off of it. So like I'm ready. If you're selling my book for like $100, all I'm saying is my Venmo is at Skelly. It's the same as my Instagram. So I'm here.
yeah, I think it's just crazy, dude. The back market. I mean, it's really well, the kayfabe channel is partially responsible for some of the stuff that goes up. You know, like anytime they drop a video or they drop an interview, the creators' work or the books they talk about instantly skyrocket, and it's nuts.
When
But
you get talked about on thick lines, it like takes money away from you somehow.
yeah, I wish I had that. I wish I had that same effect with the work that I do. But you know, I love turning people on to cool shit, and I love talking to creators like yourself, and you know, maybe people that didn't know about your work discover it. You know, like that's the goal. You know, like what I do, and I just I love your work, and I'm excited to see what else you have coming up. In terms of you mentioned crowdfunding. You know, like you haven't had successful Kickstarters. Is that something that you think would be a viable option for the collection of Heaven as opposed to doing it at Fantagraphics? And could you still have a Fantagraphics version technically and then just have a Kickstarter version?
It's a good question. There are a lot of specifics I have to think about with that because distribution, I would need to bring someone else on for help with that. So whatever I raise, I would need to be able to pay this person for assistance with because this is something that's totally outside of my experience realm. I simply just don't know. And I also don't think I have time to figure it out. But if it is something that, it could kind of cross-pollinate between a Kickstarter and my efforts in Fantagraphics, I think that could be something that would be really interesting. And I do wonder about that model because I know that Valiant just did a book that was like that, right? Where it was crowdfunded, but it's going to be distributed by Valiant. I think that was what Jim Rugg's book was, where he raised money for it and then it was distributed through Ad House. So if there's some way to have like symbiosis between me and another entity where the money is going back and forth to all parties and everyone's happy, that would be fantastic. But who knows? We'll see. This is also, Heaven is a book that I'm really trying as best as I can to make as straightforward as possible. So if every book is sort of different, this will be the book that I'm like, I'm going to go as close as I can to like really touching genre and then like back off of it. Because I've always wanted to do a like coming of age type story that's straightforward but still weird. So I want to make sure it gets to the right channels when it's done. My cats are about to go nuclear on each other. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Can we do peace? Okay, they're choosing peace right now, so this is good.
Yeah, I think that you definitely should look into that in terms of like with the publisher because so many publishers are doing it. I mean, Boom is doing it too. Boom Studios is doing it. Valiant's doing it. And I think you reach a different audience. That's well. Also, it's also selfish. I like getting Kickstarters because everybody always has like the extra stuff that you can get along with it, sketches and stuff like that. And I think that kind of just like boosts not only the money that you guys get, but the fans get some really cool swag in terms of that. But the audience for Kickstarter, I mean, I constantly hear it from different creators that, there's some people that just get comics from Kickstarter, which to me is weird. It's a weird concept to think about, but it is the case.
That's really interesting. That's so funny too. Yeah, I just got something that I ordered off Kickstarter like a couple weeks ago. Yeah, I mean it makes sense, you know. It could be viable, but I'm also I I'm tethered to, the traditional way of publishing just in the same way that you love books. Like I would much prefer to have a book. It's nice to, have a like a Kindle version or what have you, but it's nice to have a book that is done by people who know what they're doing. And I just have to test my own limits there, and it might be a bit too ambitious for this one. So we'll see, but I'm glad to hear you say that. That's very reassuring.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a platform that I was skeptical of maybe even a couple years ago, but just so many people like Shelley Bond has done her Kickstarters through there, and all of them are fucking awesome. And Jim Rugg did his, so it's cool to see people like name. I don't say name brand, but names that and it makes it like, oh man, this is almost more. It makes it more legitimate, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I don't want to say it was illegitimate before, but either way, I'm excited. I'm gonna get all the single issues. Gonna get the collection when it comes out. What other things do you have in the works that you can talk about right now?
Oh wow. I, I think that's pretty much it. I always have this feeling that I'm not doing anything, and I'll bring it up to people and they'll be like, "Well, you have a podcast, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, are you working on a comic? I'm like, "Yeah." I actually just picked up a big illustration project, which is great. I have that. I have my job. I have whatever the hell else I like pretend that I'm doing. But I'm just always in a loop of like, I don't do enough. I need to do more. And then I'm like snowed under, and then I dig myself out, and then the process resumes itself. So that's that's all I have going on. It's not much.
Okay. And then, before I let you go, do you have any recs? Anything that you've read? Any cartoonists that you've kind of been turned on to recently that you want to like give a shout out to?
Let's see. My friend and co-host Sally Madden just had a few zines come out called My Snack Diary, issues 1, 2, and 3, and those are fantastic. What is? I just want to make sure I know this person's last name really quick. Let me see, because I'll feel like a total goober if I mess this up. I got to read the new, the Jaime part of Love and Rockets, and that's really good. Corinne Halbert. She does comics called Acid Nun.
Yeah.
I think 3 is either out or is coming out soon. I really love what she's doing. I love her stuff. I love Tia Roche. Who else is there? Bezamina. But I think Corinne would be my recommendation. Alex Graham I also really like. There's a lot. Oh, you know what? My friend Jordan Crane just put out a new book is coming out from Fantagraphics by him soon, and that looks really good. Gosh, I don't know. I recommend everything. Everything is very good.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of good stuff. I mean, I always have a hard time answering that question too when people ask, but I always, I ask on the off chance that I hear a name that I haven't heard before and I can discover something cool. Corinne Halbert she's definitely really dope. Acid Nun is an awesome book. Yeah. But yeah, I thank you for the Rex and stuff, and thank you for taking time to chat with me. Before I let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening, can you let everyone know where they can pick up Heaven, where we can find you online, and I'll drop those links down below.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's so good catching up with you. Thank you for having me back. You can find me at my website, which is katieskellycomics.com, and that has a link to my shop where you can pick up Heaven and a lot of other good stuff. And my Instagram is at Skelly, and so is my Venmo. So just keep that in mind. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for taking time to chat with me again. And
Of
I
course.
definitely want to talk with you again in the future. And yeah, it's been a blast.
Thank you so much. Take care.